Pushkin. Hey, Happiness Lab listeners. Today, you are in for a treat, because by the end of this episode, my guest and I will have shared how you can do something totally awesome, totally life-saving, and something totally happiness-inducing with almost zero effort. And spoiler, it's going to involve the website givedirectly.org/TB. That's givedirectly.org/TB. One of my favorite parts of being host of the Happiness Lab is that I get to share stuff that I love with you. Like the time I interviewed my 80s heartthrob, Rob Lowe, about nostalgia. Just talking with you on this Zoom call. And I'm taken back to, movies I watched in grade school and fun times in college.
That is amazing. It makes me feel so good.
Or when I geeked out about Star Trek with Lieutenant Wesley Crusher himself, Will Wheaton.
Star Trek looks through the screen and it says, there is a place specifically for you in the future. Like you, Laurie, there is a space for you in the future. I loved that.
But today, I not only get to chat with someone who I have nerded out about for a very, very long time, but I also have the chance to invite you to help that guest do something to make the world a better place. If you happen to be a nerd fighter like me, then get ready, because today I'll be chatting with the amazing John Green.
Hold on, I don't even have my headphones in. This is a catastrophe of the scale of which nobody's ever seen before.
No, you're good. You're good.
Let me make sure I'm on the right fancy mic. I am. Okay, great.
I'm guessing a lot of my Happiness Lab listeners know who John Green is. John is first and foremost a best-selling author, both of beloved fictional books like Turtles All the Way Down and The Fault in Our Stars, but also nonfiction greats like The Anthropocene Reviewed, a book in which he expertly reviews everything from Diet Dr. Pepper to the smallpox vaccine. But John is also an educator, who with his brother Hank created the awe-inspiring Vlog Brothers and Crash Course YouTube channels. John has been a hero of mine for a while, because I see a lot of happiness science in his work. Did you ever think that you would be an expert on a happiness podcast?
No, I don't. I don't give off the vibes of somebody who's an expert in happiness, to be honest with you, Doc.
But you so are, dude. I mean, you're so focused on things like awe and understanding that negative emotions are the things that you want to stick around with. Like, you kind of follow all the science.
I mean, when I listen to the podcast, I often think like, oh, I'm closer than I thought I was. Because I'm pretty far away from the sort of like wellness industry version of happiness, but I'm pretty close to the Dr. Laurie Santos version of happiness, which makes me really, for lack of a better term, happy.
John's work embodies so many of the lessons that I've learned studying the science of happiness. That meaning comes not from avoiding suffering, but embracing it. That there's wonder to be found in the mundane. And that even in the face of a lot of terrible, sucky stuff, we can choose to band together to actually fix things. And that's the goal of this episode. John's latest book deals with a problem facing people around the world.
The new book is called Everything is Tuberculosis. It's a history of tuberculosis told through the perspective of both a long-term historical lens, but also the life of one kid living with tuberculosis in Sierra Leone.
And so just for listeners who might not be as familiar, what is tuberculosis?
So tuberculosis is an airborne disease. It usually affects the lungs, but it can infect any part of the body, really. And it makes people really sick, but it tends to make them sick quite slowly because the bacteria divides very slowly. And so you can be sick for months or years, but if left untreated, tuberculosis usually does result in death. Fortunately, since the 1950s, we've had a cure for tuberculosis. It's a bacterial infection, so the cure is antibiotics given every day over 4 to 6 months.
And so why write a book about tuberculosis now? Why tell this particular story at this time?
Well, because tuberculosis is still the world's deadliest infectious disease, astonishingly. I mean, I say astonishingly because it's been curable for so long. Like, since the disease became curable, we've allowed over 150 million people to die of it, which is just a figure that's hard for me to get my head around. But it just speaks to how disease is a biomedical phenomenon, but it's also a social one. And how we imagine disease, how we allocate resources around disease, that shapes not just like how people live and die of diseases like tuberculosis, but also who lives and dies of diseases like TB.
John, it seemed like part of your TB journey was trying to fix the problem, but part of the TB journey, at least in the book, seemed like in some ways TB was sort of like cool. I don't know if you can use the word cool for some disease that kills lots of people, but it's kind of a fascinating cultural journey.
Yeah, I mean, one of the fascinating parts of that cultural journey is that for a while it was considered cool. Like Victor Hugo's friends would joke with him that he could be a great novelist if only he contracted consumption, because it was so widely believed that consumption made you a great artist and also made you really beautiful. This was part of the romanticization of the disease in the 18th and 19th centuries. But really, tuberculosis is everywhere in history. It's I argue in the book that it was an ancillary cause of World War I. It was the cause of the cowboy hat. It's the reason New Mexico is a state. The strangeness of tuberculosis is that because it was such a powerful and important part of our culture, I mean, this was a disease that killed 1 out of every 7 people, that it inevitably also became a disease that had a huge impact on our culture and our history.
Wait, TB is the reason we have the cowboy hat? That doesn't make any sense.
And yet it makes total sense, because there was a hat maker in New Jersey named John B. Stetson who got tuberculosis and was told that his only chance of survival was to go west. This was a very common belief at the time. You move west and then you recover your health in the sweet, clean air. And John B. Stetson made it out to St. Joseph, Missouri. And while he was there, he recovered from tuberculosis. About 25% of people, for reasons we still don't understand, will recover without treatment. And John B. Stetson was in that lucky few. And as he recovered, he noticed that the hats in the American West were not very good, because there were like coonskin caps that were literally bug infested. There were like straw hats that folks from New Mexico and Mexico had brought up, but like they didn't work particularly well in St. Joe's rainy environment. And so he invented the Stetson hat. And so, yes, there would be no cowboy hat without tuberculosis.
And so your own introduction to TB, as I understand it, started when you met somebody incredible, somebody who reminded you of your own son. Tell me about Henry.
Yeah, so Henry shares a name with my son, who is also named Henry. And when I first met Henry Ryder in Sierra Leone in 2019, I thought he was about the same age as my son. I thought he was about 9 years old. And he just walked me all around the hospital. And you're right, he's just somebody who's incredible. He was kind of the mayor of that place. Everywhere he went, people were shaking his hand, rubbing his head. And he took me to the lab. He took me to the wards where the patients were living. And he eventually took me back to the doctors who were meeting to discuss cases they were concerned about or whatever. And they sort of lovingly and laughingly shooed Henry away. And then I said, "Whose kid is that? Is that one of your kids?" And they said, "No, he's a patient. And he's in fact one of the patients that we're consulting about because we're very concerned about him." And it turned out that Henry wasn't 9 like I imagined him. He was 17. He'd just been so emaciated, first by malnutrition and then by the disease, that he looked much younger. And it was really in following Henry's story and getting to know Henry that I ended up writing the book.
And so something that I was shocked by in your book and kind of embarrassed when I was reading it is that I sort of assumed that TB was like this disease of the past, like some like old Victorian problem that, you look in old pictures and stuff like that.
Totally.
Give me a sense of why we don't realize the scope of TB today and what the actual scope is today.
I think one of the reasons we don't realize the scope is that it tends to be a problem in places where people are least likely to have access to megaphones, least likely to be able to make their voices heard. But the scope of the problem is really, really significant. About 10 million people get sick with tuberculosis every year, and about 1.25 million die. And unfortunately, that number is likely to go up in the next few years.
This seems really crazy, right? That the disease is still around, even though we have good treatments for it.
Yeah.
Why aren't we fixing this? Like, this seems like a problem that medically we've sorted out the hard part, right? We have antibiotics that can fix this. Like, why are people still dying from this?
Well, TB isn't an easy disease to cure by any stretch of the imagination. But, my brother had cancer a couple of years ago, and that also wasn't an easy disease to cure. It cost about 150 times more to cure my brother's cancer than it cost to cure Henry's tuberculosis. And yet nobody at any time said, "I'm not sure that it makes sense to treat you. It might be better to focus more on prevention." No, it's true that in a narrow sense, it's a better investment to focus on the prevention of cancer than it is to focus on treating cancer. But of course, that's a ludicrous thing to say. We would never say that to someone living with cancer. And yet Henry heard that all the time. He heard that there just aren't resources out there to offer you the kind of personalized, tailored care that you would need in order to survive. And as a result, he was really, really sick for a really long time. I mean, Henry was essentially on his deathbed when finally, thanks to an extraordinary doctor, Dr. Jérôme Tefera, and the Sierra Leonean Ministry of Health and the nonprofit organization Partners in Health, they all kind of came together and decided that this kid was worthy of that kind of treatment. And even though, as Dr. Jérôme told me, I know it's just one kid, but what if he can be the first of many? And he has been the first of many, blessedly. So many more people are receiving the kind of treatment that Henry finally was able to receive. And that's why he's here with us today.
But it seems like what you're saying is that TB isn't just like a medical problem. It's really like a social justice problem. It's really sort of a disease of poverty.
Right.
Is that kind of what you found writing the book?
Absolutely. It is a social justice problem. Tuberculosis follows the paths of injustice that we blaze for it. And that's been the case for decades now. Anybody can get TB. It's an airborne disease, but you're vastly more likely to become sick and die if you're malnourished, if you have other health problems like an HIV infection or diabetes. And so it's a disease of injustice in every way. And the reason I wrote this book is because for me, it's the exemplary disease of injustice. It's certainly not the only one, but it is a disease that is a social phenomenon as much as a biomedical one.
It also seems to be one that we kind of ignore for the same reason we ignore poverty, right? Like we like to think we have control over the disease. We like to think that we earned our status if we happen to kind of be privileged enough not to be in a place where this disease is wiping people out. It seems to also be kind of a problem of human nature.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's a great observation. We are uncomfortable with dealing with randomness and injustice in our social orders because, of course, we are. It discomforts those of us who are extremely privileged. It also discomforts other people because we don't really want to live in a world where like the most powerful emperor of all time, Alexander the Great, can die from just like typhoid or malaria or whatever, which is why like for centuries we've had rumors that he died of poisoning because that would be a much more human-centric thing to have happen, a much more agency-based thing to have happen. The places where we don't have agency or where our agency is very confusing, like it is with tuberculosis, are uncomfortable for us, I think, because we don't want to reckon with not just the randomness in the social order, but also the injustice that's built into the social order.
I mean, especially when it comes to life and death. Like if you're someone like Henry and you're literally hearing, your life is not worth saving because it's too expensive given where you live. I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it really is horrifying. And yet people are told that every day, and not just people with TB, but also people living with other diseases. When my brother got cancer, one of the first things he said to me was this has a 93% cure rate in the United States and a 20 to 70% cure rate in poor countries. And the reason we don't know whether it's 20% or 70% is because we don't even do a good job of counting.
Man. And you just said something that was even scarier, right? You said that, TB is really bad now and it's likely going to get worse.
Yeah.
And that's in part because, you and I are having this conversation at a strange time when things are getting worse. Why are things getting worse? And what's happened recently to change things?
So we've had dramatic cuts, mostly from the U.S. government, but also from other governments to tuberculosis response. The United States has long been the most generous funder of tuberculosis response. And unfortunately, we've walked that back in a very sudden, chaotic way, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of people seeing their treatment interrupted mid-course. Like I said earlier, it takes between 4 and 6 months of treatment to be cured. If that gets interrupted in the middle, even if your treatment gets restarted, you're very likely to develop drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is a much, much more serious thing. That's what Henry was living with. And we know that most of those people will die, unfortunately. And just as catastrophically, many of those people will circulate drug-resistant tuberculosis in their own communities. We've already seen the rates of tuberculosis death go up. I think 12,000 people, quote-unquote, excess deaths have happened in the last 3 months. But it'll go up much more dramatically as time goes on because tuberculosis is a slow killer.
I mean, this is like a slow-burning moral emergency. This isn't just like, oh, some aid got cut in this country that I don't care about so much. Like this is like really tragic and utterly preventable.
Yeah, utterly preventable. And also, I mean, frankly, scary because the more complicated drug-resistant tuberculosis you have circulating in communities, the more likely it is that we'll see more cases of TB that we simply don't have any tools to treat. I mean, I try not to be a person who engages in hyperbole when it comes to global health. And I think it's important to understand that the main reason we need to respond to this tragedy is because it's affecting millions of human beings. But there is another reason to respond to this tragedy, which is that if we aren't careful, it will affect billions of human beings.
And so this all is pretty sucky. But one of the reasons...
Yeah, Laurie, can you see why maybe I'm not an expert in happiness?
I know.
I mean, are the people listening to this like, oh, this guy's got happiness cracked?
They're like, I'm on the wrong podcast. What has happened? No. But this is the reason I love you and your work, John, so much, is that in the face of sucky stuff, you have us do something, right? Which is that you have us find hope and find agency. And so when we get back from the break, we're going to talk about what we can do to fix this totally fixable problem of beating TB around the world. And we're going to see that the act of taking action to fix it is going to come with a bunch of happiness benefits that we might not even expect. Happiness Lab with John Green. We'll be right back.
You crushed that, man. I mean, that's such a pro. Like, I take like 8 takes on my briefs. One of my favorite John Green quotes, which might be apocryphal, you can tell me, is allegedly the following: "The most punk rock thing to do in the world right now is to embrace the current problems with earnestness and optimism." I did say that. You did say that. Okay. It's cool. Like, it's punk rock to like look in the face of something really sucky, especially something as bad as global health problems and TB, and say, we can fix this. And so what's the best way that folks who are listening to this right now can fix the problem of TB with earnestness and optimism? Well, I think there's a bunch of ways we can respond. I mean, just our attention matters. Like, we are much more likely to solve the problems we pay attention to. And when we think about our attention, we need to be thinking about it as a resource that's incredibly valuable, right? Like, all these social media companies know the value of our attention, and we need to understand it too. But I also think that there are functional things that we can do. We can give to organizations that are making a difference, and there are a lot of ways to make a difference with TB. So obviously, there's organizations that are fighting TB itself, like Partners in Health. There's also organizations that are fighting malnutrition and poverty overall, which we know is a good way to fight tuberculosis. We know from the history of the United States and the United Kingdom that when poverty goes down and when food insecurity goes down, tuberculosis rates also go down. And that means that the cure for tuberculosis isn't in some lab somewhere that, and I don't have to like learn about how to create new antibiotic cures. The cure is actually in our wallets, and maybe like even small change that we have in our wallets. Yeah, it is incredible the extent to which tuberculosis is a resource problem. Now, we do need better tools. We have great researchers. They need to be better supported so that we have better vaccines for TB. I mean, the only vaccine we have is 105 years old. It's not very effective. We need better, shorter treatment regimens. We need better diagnostics. We need all of that stuff. But we have the tools to cure tuberculosis today. We have the tools to offer people, 93% cure rates today. And we just need to be using those tools. It's the rare problem that actually is mostly a resource problem. And so today, Happiness Lab listeners are going to get a chance to help fix that resource problem. If you're a fan of the Happiness Lab, we've worked with Give Directly before. Give Directly is one of the most effective, cost-effective ways to reduce poverty because they just give people money directly. And one of the cool things is this is actually studies on like giving people cash directly and the effect it can have specifically on TB. John, I don't know if you know this study is one that was done in Brazil. Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. Do you want to explain? Yeah, they found. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably misquote it, and then you can fix everything I said. But that's the nature of the amateur speaking and then the professor speaking, right? That's the student-teacher relationship at its core. So my understanding is that there was unconditional cash payment transfers to fight poverty in an impoverished community in Brazil. And an unexpected side effect of this was that rates of tuberculosis went down by, I believe, 50%, went down really dramatically. 50%. I mean, 50% is like bonkers because you'd think that you need to come in and vaccinate everybody or add hospitals. Just giving people some money actually reduced the rates of TB deaths by 50%. And this is a reminder that people know how to spend money. People are much better judges. People living their lives are much better judges of how to spend their money than I ever could be. And so this is why I'm such a big fan of Give Directly, is because they empower people to make financial decisions that work for them. And as a result, we see less food insecurity. We see more kids going to school. We see safer housing. And all of that contributes to lower rates of tuberculosis, among many other benefits. And so just talk about why, if you're in a community that's facing tuberculosis, this more money might help, right? I'm thinking in terms of prevention and then
finding out and treating the disease once you have it.
Yeah, so that's one obvious way, right? Is that you're more likely to be able to use the healthcare system and benefit from the healthcare system. But there are less obvious ways too. Like you're more likely to have safe housing with where maybe you aren't living cheek by jowl with lots of other people, where maybe you have a little bit better ventilation in your home, which we know reduces the risk of transmitting TB. You might be able to afford better public transportation, so you're on public transport that isn't quite as crowded. There's a lot of different ways in which this could prevent TB infection, but it can also prevent TB death by allowing people to access the healthcare system.
I mean, that was one of the things that was striking in your book where, you just talk about the reality of this disease in Sierra Leone. You talk about how people might even have access to treatments, maybe the money for treatments, but treatment's super far away. And so they don't have the money for public transportation or they can't miss work. And then they wind up not getting treated and the disease gets worse.
Yeah.
And maybe it turns into drug-resistant disease, which is even worse. I mean, it's just incredible how much resources can help here.
Yeah, resources can really help. And then, we often, those of us who live in countries with relatively strong systems, and maybe I shouldn't be including myself in that category, but I think I still can. Those of us who live in countries with relatively strong systems forget sometimes how many systems have to work together for this stuff to happen, right? Like you need functioning transportation systems, you need electricity so that there can be cold chain, and you need trucks that have cold chain. And like in order to keep a vaccine cold is a tremendous amount of work. And so all of this stuff has to work together for us to fight diseases of injustice. And yet there is also the truth that like systems get stronger when people are less poor. We know this. We know this from history. We know it from our history. And so that's why I'm a big fan of an organization like Give Directly that, fights poverty in the most radical and yet stunningly obvious way possible.
Obvious way. It is funny how we try to complicate, charity. Just we're going to have middlemen and all this stuff. And if you've heard the show before and heard our work with Give Directly before, you know that basically what Give Directly does is they give these so-called unconditional cash transfers to people in poverty. Basically, that just means no strings attached, no bureaucracy, no middleman. Poorest families just get a bunch of cash.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do with Give Directly now is that we're going to actually give these unconditional cash transfers to people living in the countries with the highest TB rates. So these are going to be places like Bangladesh, Kenya, Liberia, Uganda.
Wow.
Last time we did this, John, we raised over $100,000 for Give Directly.
Wow.
I like to think that if you are involved, we're going to get more money, but I'm going to pledge, I didn't do this last time, but this time I'm going to pledge, I'm going to match the first $10,000 of donations that we get from Happiness Lab listeners, which automatically puts us up to $20,000 if the Happiness Lab listeners give $10,000.
I will match the next $10,000.
Oh my gosh. And if my math is correct and we're doing the matching, that means we already get up to $40,000. You see the psych professor doing math in her head of 10 plus 10 plus 10.
It's a beautiful thing to watch. Your eyes rolled back in your head for those of you just listening. And it was really a wonder to see Dr. Santos try to multiply 10 times 4.
But talk about the benefits that we could see if we actually are able to raise this much money, especially during this time of so many aid cuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overstate the difference that it makes. I mean, I've seen the difference that it made in my friend Henry's life to go from living in absolute poverty to not. Everything becomes easier. And I'll give you one example. Henry spent 2 hours going to school and 2 hours going from school every single day for the first 2.5 years of his education at the University of Sierra Leone. So you can imagine what a burden that is. And it's not like you can study on these incredibly crowded transports that he would be taking, trucks or buses that he would be taking. But then he was able to afford a motorbike. And as a result, now he can go directly to school and come directly home. That's a blessing for him in every imaginable way. But I think, it also comes down to things like safe housing. I mean, for years, Henry lived in a home where the roof leaked. It was a steel or tin roof, and the roof leaked. And so he was wet every single night. He would tell me that there was no place that he could put his bedroll where he wouldn't be wet and where his mom wouldn't be wet. And that's miserable. It's also bad for your health and, bad for your quality of sleep, bad for your mental health. And so I I just think like small differences are big, big differences in impoverished communities.
And what's really incredible, and the psychology didn't need to work this way, but it does, is that if you can do something to help somebody in that awful situation, even with like $5, $10, what the research really shows is that you'll be boosting your own happiness too. It turns out we get more of a happiness kind of bang for our buck by giving $5 in a way that will help somebody else than we do if we spend it on ourselves, blow it on a latte or something. But some of your work shows the second way we get a happiness benefit from this, right? Which is that when we take action about something that's sucky, we wind up feeling like the world is less sucky. We wind up doing something to like build our own hope up. And I know you've talked about this a lot, like in the face of just like things being really bad, actually trying to fix it can make you a little bit more hopeful.
Yeah, it's always been hard for me to get out of bed in the morning. It is hard for me not just to stare at the ceiling. It is hard for me not just to scroll on my phone and doom scroll until it's bedtime again. Like that's just who I have always been. It's always been hard for me. And I have found that absolutely, that the more that I give of my resources, of my time, of my attention to problems of the world, instead of feeling worse, I feel better, especially if I don't just let myself get overwhelmed by the fire hose of problems, right? Like I do not labor under the delusion that tuberculosis is the only problem that we're facing in the United States right now, by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it is the place where I feel like I have chosen to try to make a difference. And in some ways, that makes it easier to live with all the rest of the fire hose, because I can say like, well, I hope other people, and I believe other people are making the choice to respond to climate change, or other people are making the choice to respond to this injustice or that injustice, because I'm making the choice to respond to tuberculosis, which, I feel like I'm uniquely able to respond to well. And I do find that boosts my happiness. I mean, I just got off this grueling 3-week-long book tour. And going into the book tour, I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to come home a shell of a person. I'm going to come home destroyed and devastated, and like it's going to take me months to recover. And what actually happened is I got home and I was really happy to see my family and really happy to see my dog, but like I didn't feel that way at all. I felt encouraged because I'd been on the road meeting people who are also fighting to make the world better. And that's just an encouraging thing to be around.
Yeah. And also what the researchers is like, it doesn't actually matter how much you do. I mean, you went on a grueling book tour and wrote a whole book about this, but like if somebody's listening and all you can give is $3, $5, just do that. Our last Give Directly campaigns were more made up of people giving incredibly small amounts of money that they thought were small. But it turns out when we all do it together, we can have this huge impact.
And that's true, not just for money, right? Like that's also true for advocacy, for activism. Thousands of people came together to ask Johnson & Johnson, for instance, to abandon their patents on bedaquiline, their secondary patent attempts on bedaquiline.
And maybe just say what bedaquiline is, just so.
I just assume that the world knows what bedaquiline is. Bedaquiline is a really important drug for treating multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, and one of the drugs that Henry really needed and was told that he couldn't afford. And so thousands of people coming together to make that accomplish something that no one could have accomplished in isolation. And I think that's very much and very often the case, is that we feel powerless. But one of the reasons we feel powerless is because we feel like we're alone, and our $3 or our email to our congressperson doesn't matter much. But when you're part of a huge community, and you are part of a huge community, if you're part of the Happiness Lab community, then your $3 matters more, because it's not $3. It's $3 in partnership with thousands of other people's $3.
And so end us off on what makes you hopeful about fighting TB and fighting other sucky stuff when you can do that in the context of a community.
Well, I think, one of the things I've learned from you and from my therapist is that pushing negative emotions to the side or ignoring them or trying to deny them is not the right way. It's maybe the easy way, and the way that sort of makes a kind of common sense, but it just doesn't work very well. And so I'm engaging with a lot of negative emotions right now, but I'm using them to fuel hope instead of using them to fuel despair. That's what I'm trying to do anyway, to fuel hope that better diagnostics are coming for TB, that maybe a better vaccine is coming, and to fuel hope that, yes, like we have fallen down the staircase of human health in the last few months, but that's not permanent. This isn't the end of the story. This is the middle of the story. And it really falls to us to write a better ending.
Can part of that ending be you saying to my listeners, don't forget to be awesome? Because that would be really cool.
Yes. They say in my hometown, friends, don't forget to be awesome.
So, tuberculosis, terrible disease, but only a disease of poverty. We can fix it. And if we want to treat poverty like the emergency it is and TB like the emergency it is, we can help by giving to Give Directly. So Happiness Lab listeners, go visit givedirectly.org/TB. Make me and John, apparently, pony up our $10,000 to fix something that is totally fixable with our collective effort. John, thank you so much for coming on the Happiness Lab. You totally are a happiness expert. I know you don't think that, but... I
love that. I'm going to tell my therapist that this week. I'm going to say, did you know, Joellen, I am, according to a happiness expert, a bit of a happiness expert myself.
I'm going to see the eyes rolling in this podcast.
Thanks so much to John Green for taking the time to chat with me. And I'm just thrilled that he's also going to be matching up to $10,000 in donations from all of you. I had no idea he'd be willing to do that. So if hearing about this totally fixable problem of TB has made you excited to help decrease world suck and make yourself feel awesome, please consider giving whatever you're comfortable sharing to givedirectly.org/TB. That's givedirectly.org/TB. Seriously, anything is helpful. Even tossing $5 towards this important cause can help us all come together as a community to fix something important. I know these times feel very tough and very uncertain, but research shows that you'll likely feel a lot better about this big mess if you take some positive action. And you can do that with just $1 donated at givedirectly.org/TB. That's givedirectly.org/TB. John and I also recently recorded a live event to celebrate the release of his new book, Everything is Tuberculosis. We had a lot of fun, despite the subject matter, and even ended the evening with my favorite thing ever, a sing-along.
We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here.
I'm going to drop that show as a special bonus, so look out for it coming soon on the Happiness Lab with me, Dr. Laurie Santos.